Okay. Sorry about that, folks. Um, congestion here. Felt the need to go live again. My usual stuff. I want to finish covering. Um, it's weird. I don't know why it feels the need to tell me this. I get it. My comments are on my screen. Okay, so Dee's not going to be able to make it except maybe later today, unless she jumps in. I know she has a doctor's appointment today, so that's on the to-do list. Hopefully, she'll be getting through this without any problems. Fingers crossed, as always. We all know how it goes. So I just figured I'd do that. Um, oops, hold on. I gotta bring this forward and minimize this. Oh my god, it's gonna be one of those days where my hands just hate me. I just heard a ding on my Discord. I got tagged in a post. Let me scroll to it. I will have to catch this after the live. Absolutely love everybody on my Discord, but got to do this. So today I'm continuing the youth executions, but I'm also adding in a bunch of these women who had been hanged over the years since 1632 to 1937, so 105 years. Oops, sorry, title. Get over it if you guys want to nitpick it. I'm not going to do jack shit about it. Sorry. You get 105 years of executions of women, and the reasons behind it. I actually had to save this as a PDF. so I could pull up the individual ones that I wanted to. Hold on, I gotta save this, update it. But yeah, there's quite a few since 1632. Um, so I've got a little bit of a precursor to it, including the oldest woman hanged. And again, we'll discuss briefly the youngest female ever hanged. So, or executed, I should say. Not so much anything else, but I'll try to keep that as brief as possible. But there are a lot of very strange stories that led to it, including one that I was able, because again, I was speed reading this. Um, I caught one where it was a wrongful execution and they didn't know about it. And then the one got a stay of execution 23 minutes late. So, strange as it is the case. So, let's jump into this and let's do a quick speed read of the circumstance of hold on, George Steiny Jr. His situation is absolutely horrific. Again, I don't like the death sentence for people as a very quick way to end a trial. I can't tell you how many people throughout history have been wrongly accused and proven later to have been innocent. So it always bugs me when there are people who have been executed wrongly, and why I think the death sentence is really just not the best option for dealing with people unless you have 100% sure and they confess to it. I don't like the idea of executions because of wrongful executions, and to me, that is just as bad of a crime as the crime that was committed against the initial victim, because now you're harming more families. And I get it. They say, almost all of these are accurate, but in my opinion, there's way too many that are questionable. So, let's jump into this because it's one of those ones that is just kind of heartbreaking. So, let's get to the wrongful conviction. Is Hold on, let's get to his story. Okay, so who was the youngest person to get the death penalty? George Steiny Jr. was the youngest person in the United States to ever receive the death penalty. In other parts of the world, there are records of younger children who faced execution, as well as vague stories from the United States that have no defined dates. And that is possible. And I would love to get my hands on some of those, but they're very hard to find. Um, Despite this, George Steiny is the youngest American with a confirmed recorded date of birth to ever be executed for a crime. In his early life, George Steiny was born October 21st, 1929, in Elcolu, South Carolina. I apologize if I pronounced that wrong. On a hot, muggy fall day, his parents were Amy and George Steiny Sr., from whom George would get his name. No kidding, really? You don't say. Senior, Junior, kind of, implicates that. Just saying. So it was a small mill town populated by working class, like most South Carolina cities and towns at the time. It was part of an intensely racially charged, segregated society. The town's white and black neighborhoods were separated by railroad tracks that cut through the center of town. Huh. Sounds like so many. And this is again where we get the phrase wrong side of the tracks. Hey JJ, thank you. I appreciate it. So George and his siblings, Charles, Catherine, and Amy, were forced to grow up in this segregated world. Because of that, he faced deep-seated prejudices throughout his life, ultimately leading to his execution. Yeah. Um, early in the morning of March 23rd, 1944. So that puts him at almost 15 years old. The bodies of two young white girls that had gone missing the night before were found. Betty June Binnicker and Emma Thames, um, 11 and 7 respectively, were found in a ditch on the black neighborhood side of the railroad tracks. The murders of the two girls were violent. Both had been beaten with a weapon, which was hypothesized to have been something blunt and metallic, like a railroad spike. Okay. The trauma that they suffered was severe, both to their skulls. Oh, severe. Both their skulls had been broken and penetrated by the weapon. Sadly, George Steiny Sr. had helped search for the girls, taking part in solving the crime that his son would eventually be executed for. That's got to be wild to be that sure your child was never involved, that you're helping with the search. And just to find out, yeah, you know what? Your kid's gonna be convicted and executed. That's insane. His dad actually participated in the search. Um, but the previous day, Betty and Emma were riding their bicycles looking for flowers to pick. On their search, they passed the Steiny residence and spoke to George Jr. and his younger sister, Amy, who obviously was named after her mother, which did happen, but they didn't give girls the title of junior for some reason. But yes, women can be named after their mothers and have a junior in the household. So, asking where they might find a certain type of passion flower called maypops. This interaction is what would lead police to George Steiny Jr. the next day, but his sister Amy would report that George had been with her at the time the girls were killed. Oh, yeah, heaven forbid they should actually listen to the sister. Um, the following day, on March 24th, the sheriff of Alcolu, sorry, announced that George Steiny Jr. had been arrested and that the boy had confessed and produced a murder weapon. I question that. Both George and his son John had been arrested for the crime of murdering Betty and Emma, but only George and his brother. Oh my God. I said son, didn't I? George and his brother. I don't know why I said son. Only George would be kept by the police. John was released. Racial tensions, the connection to the girls speaking to George before their disappearance, and the fact the girls were found in the the wrong side of the tracks within Kolu led to the swift arrest. The officer who arrested George Steiny Jr. was H.S. Newman, a deputy. He provided a written record claiming that George had confessed and led him to the location of the murder weapon, a piece of iron that Newman claimed was in the same ditch that Betty and Emma had been found in. I don't believe this for 1 minute. I don't believe it. I'm sorry. I'm calling BS on that deputy's story. You guys know me. I will defend what is factual. This sounds like a load of BS to me. Just saying. Um, George's family were forced to leave their home and were unable to see George at any time before his trial. This meant he was alone with no support for 81 days. Holy shit. The trial of George Steiny Jr. occurred on April 24th, 1944. George was given counsel, but it was severely lacking, coming in the form of a court appointed counsel who was actually a tax commissioner. What the hell kind of nonsense is that? I need a court appointed lawyer. Well, here's the best we got, a tax commissioner. You know, that's the best we can do for you, a tax commissioner. Really? Come on. What state was this again? South Carolina? Hold on. Let me see where this is. Um, South Carolina, get your shit together. What the hell was wrong with you? Seriously? A tax commissioner? Anyways, no African Americans were allowed inside to witness the trial, but more than 1,000 white Americans managed to fit into the courtroom. Geez, I wonder why. I mean, this is one of those cases where I gotta side with, this is so biased. It ain't even funny. Steiny's jury was all white after a trial based almost solely on the shaky confessions apparently given by Steiny. The jury deliberated for only 10 minutes before receiving a verdict. Well, geez, of course. So George Steiny was found guilty, obviously, despite appeals from the NAACP and other South Carolina citizens. He was sentenced to death. Steiny was allowed to see his family a single time. On June 16th, before 8 a.m., George was led to the execution chambers and seated in the electric chair. Rumors say that a Bible had been used to boost him up since he was so short, but sources are conflicting about this point. The boy was restrained and he declined to offer to say any last words. Well, what's the point? What's the point of saying anything if you know it's not going to change the damn thing? I mean, I've been in that circumstance. I have been falsely accused of stuff, and I just stood there with my mouth shut because I had absolutely jack shit I could do about it, and I ended up getting consequenced for it. It's called, unfortunately, it's part of life. Sometimes that happens, but on something like this, that's just even worse. Um, a leather strap was placed in his mouth, at which time George began to cry, his face covered with a mask, and the switch was flipped, executing George Steiny by means of electrocution. They have a gravestone, but I want to I'll go back to that. 70 long years after the trial of George Steiny Jr., Circuit Judge Carmen Mullen vacated his conviction, citing fundamental constitutional violations of due process that occurred during his trial. Yes, it did. The lawyer for the Steiny family, who sought George Jr.'s exoneration, put forth a claim that Steiny's confessions were coerced by police. He also brought to light the information that both George Jr.'s sister claimed he was with them at blah, blah, claimed he was with them at girls the time the girls were killed. Hold on. Oh, his sisters, plural. I was looking at that for a second. I misread that. So his sisters claimed he was with them at the time the girls were killed, making it impossible for George to be the killer. Both of Steiny's sisters were able to speak at the trial, still fighting for their justice for their brothers 70 years later. Amy Steiny Ruffiner was 77 at the time of the trial. She would say her brother, he was quiet, but he was smart. And they did replace the headstone. Um, and it says obviously his date of birth, date of death, wrongfully convicted, illegally executed by the South Carolina conviction vacated by court order dated December 16th, 2014. Holy crap. It took till 2014 to correct this. Wow. Wow. That's messed up. And there's some references and stuff. That's just wild. How could they get away with that? How was this even allowed? I mean, and again, I'm not going to lie. I know y'all hear me say the South wasn't to Civil War wasn't about slavery because it wasn't. That was the one of the lower causes. There were more serious causes above slavery. Okay, and slavery wasn't even mentioned until the middle of the Civil War. So I will hold to that, but I will not sit there and say racism wasn't a thing through that era. But I also want to point out it's not just the southern states that did this shit. Northern states did it too. There was racism, prejudice, segregation all in the north as well. Quit focusing on the south and own up to the North is just as bad. Okay. It wasn't one was worse than the other because the North likes to conveniently forget it had slaves and indentured servitude and stuff like that. So, no, no, the North, the South, you got to make sure it's straight. This one, like I said, it really, really, really was not okay at all. Um, there's so much more we could go on with this kind of stuff, but I want to jump to the next one because it is going to take a while. Um, hold on, let me do this one right here. Yes, I know I am sharing without sound. Go away. Go away. All right. Let's enlarge this sucker. Um, because it is super zoomed in. The question is, where is the zoom? Edit, comment, convert, page fill, and sign. Tools. I don't need to snip. I need to enlarge. Why can't I zoom in? Oh, you've got to be kidding me. Give me one moment while I close this and open it in a web browser because for some reason it only wants to show it in edit mode and I can't zoom. Um Hold on. Let me see something. Do I have a PDF reader? Nope, editor. Okay, so we're going to do this number. Okay, that'll work. There we go. Hold on one moment. I apologize. There it is. Share. Okay. Is that any better, JJ? Oh, come on. What the blazes? Son of a bitch. Might have to swap this out. Um, um, that's where I put it. Oh, what the fuck? Okay, can you guys hear me better now? I'm not sure if this made a difference. Okay, maybe not. What the heck is going on? Okay, I can hear my audio. Okay, there we go. Thank you, JJ, for letting me know. I just pulled up the live stream and there was a major delay. I don't know what happened with my microphone. It all of a sudden just stopped working. Okay, I switched over to my headset microphone, and that should be better. So, um, I guess I should start at the beginning then, since it decided it was going to be a pain in my ass. Let's see. So at least 7 teenage girls were hanged, Hannah Okuish being the youngest at 12, and the oldest was Rebecca Nurse at 71, which she was accused of witchcraft in 1960 or 1692. I apologize. I didn't mean to get that backwards. Um, one of the first women to ever be hanged in the United States of America was Dorothy Telby on December 6th, 1638. She was hanged in Salem, Massachusetts for the murder of her infant daughter. Difficulty Dorothy was a strong-willed, rebellious woman who had a very troubled marriage. She had been whipped for attacking her husband prior to committing the murder. And that's got me wondering, what did he do to deserve it? Or did she attack him for a reason? It doesn't make any sense. Like, what the heck happened there? Um, Maybe it's just me. Maybe who knows? But I honestly think there might have been an actual bit more to that story. Um, on March 21st, 1643, looks like that's 5 years later. 18-year-old Mary Latham was hanged in Massachusetts alongside James Britton for adultery, the only woman to ever be executed for this offense in America. Who knew adultery was warranted? I mean, if we were to still do that today, do you know how many people would be dead by execution? How many people today have committed adultery? I mean, I don't. I frown upon it. I have too many family members who are notorious for it. But how many people in the United States and around the world would be dead because of this offense of adultery? Think about all the cheaters. I mean, like, goodness gracious, that is wild to think about that they were actually executed for that. Um, Man, marriages would probably work a lot better if that was still on the if that was still an executionable offense. Oh wow. Just thinking about it's wild. So in the next one is in fall of 1648. So again, 5 years later, 32-year-old Alice Martin Clark Bishop was hanged at Plymouth, Massachusetts, for stabbing to death her 4-year-old daughter, Martha, an event which she said she had no recollection of. That's kind of scary. That's actually like really scary to think that she does not recall doing that and they had nobody else to blame. Um, on June 1st, 1660, Quaker Mary Dyer was hanged from a tree in by the Puritans for returning from exile and for refusing to accept their religious beliefs. This despite having been reprieved the previous year. Um, she seems determined to be hanged. A statue of her is on Boston Commons. Youch. I'm glad we don't execute people for not sharing religious beliefs anymore in America. It's very nice to know that we can accept that now, but 300 260 years ago, kind of scary to think about. Um God, I'm glad I'm not dead. I'm glad I didn't live in that era. Next interesting one I came across was Alice Riley. She became the first murder of her master, William Wise, in which she was assisted by her boyfriend, Richard White. She was pregnant at the time of her trial and was allowed to deliver the baby before her execution. The day after Alice's execution, White was hanged at the same gallows. Um, Murder's murder. Very few. I mean, if it, I can understand self-defense and stuff, but to work with your boyfriend to take out the person who's in charge, your slave master, basically. Yeah, and it's. I don't like that they left the race out of this. They just left it to be assumed. They should have put it in just to be sure because there were slaves of all kinds of races back then. And it bugs me that they didn't bother putting that in there. We're gonna go down. Um, Hold on. Oh, I forgot to highlight this one. Sorry, July 31st, 1735. 23-year-old Patience Sampson, a Native American, was hanged at York in Maine, I apologize, for the murder of 8-year-old Benjamin Trott, whom she had hurled down a well where he drowned. She was the second woman executed in the state, Mrs. Cornish having been hanged there in 1644, but there were no other details of her crime. So she was the second person in Maine to be hung. So quite interesting. Second woman, I should say. Um, and on May 3rd of 1738, 27-year-old Catherine Garrett, a Native American, was hanged in Connecticut for murder. I love the lack of details. I mean, absolute lack of details. Um, Sorry. And now, Sarah Simpson of December 27th, 1739. She is a widow, and so Sarah and Penelope Kennedy, a servant girl, were found guilty of murdering a child and were hanged side by side from a tree in Portsmouth, New Hampshire. The sheriff who executed them was Thomas Packer, who also hanged Ruth Blay, the next one. So school teacher Ruth Blay was executed in Portsmouth, New Hampshire in 1768. So what, 29 years later, having been convicted of concealing the body of her stillborn child in the floor of her classroom. She too was hanged from a tree, having been turned off the back of a cart. Ruth was the last female executed in New Hampshire. The state governor granted a last minute stay of execution, but it arrived minutes after Ruth had died. That sucks. That sucks. I mean, why would you hide a stillborn child in the floorboards of a school? Where you just had a child out of wedlock, something like that. They don't give the details I wish we had. And it bugs me that there's no details to it. And again, if there were details, I'm sure they would have put it in because they do it with everybody else's. Um, Next one. On July 2nd, 1778, 32-year-old Bathsheba Spooner was hanged at Worcester, Massachusetts for the murder of her husband Joshua. She attempted a defense of insanity, but this was rejected. She was found to be 5 months pregnant after her execution. That really sucks as well. If she had said, I'm pregnant, they would have held off on the execution. But no, no, she kept her pie hole shut. And yeah, everything is more questions that need answers at this point, JJ. Um, yeah. So, she and her three male co-defendants were also hanged. And they were Sergeant James Buchanan, Private William Brooks, and her lover Ezra Ross. Wow. So she was having an affair. That is people, why? Next one. On January 3rd, 1786, 27-year-old Elizabeth Wilson was hanged from the back of a cart at Chester, Pennsylvania, for killing her two illegitimate infant children. She was granted a reprieve, but it came 23 minutes too late to save her. Again, another one, another one, two moments late. How is this? Hmm. We already covered the story of Hannah Okuish, so we're not going to relive that one. um, then we have 18, nope, sorry, October 8th, 1789. Rachel Wall became the last of 39 women to be hanged in Massachusetts. She was executed with two men for separate highway robberies. In her case, she was convicted of stealing a bonnet, a teenage girl, and they hanged her for it. Why? And evidently there's oh, hold on, let me keep reading. It is doubtful that she was a pirate, and this is the most probably an urban myth. So they said she was a pirate, but she stole a damn kid's bonnet. You're gonna hang someone over a bonnet? Really? Really? Give the shit back. Go spend a couple days in jail. Don't do it again. Our country has gotten a lot better than it used to be. So if you think America's still bad, we're not perfect, but we're a hell of a lot better than this. Okay, and this is just the women. Imagine if I went through all the men, because that would probably triple or quadruple what the heck. Um, Let me jump down to the next one. Mary Cole was hanged for her self-confessed murder of her in 1812, June 26th, in New Jersey, Sussex County. October 17th, 1817, Margaret Hoteling, I do not know how to pronounce that, was hanged in Hudson, New York, having been convicted of killing her baby. Later, a neighbor confessed to the crime. Great job. Great job, New York. Really proud of you guys. Stole a bonnet on the high seas. That is a very high probability. Very high. Um, on February 18th of 1820, 27-year-old Lavinia Fisher was hanged in South Carolina for murder alongside her husband. She wore her white wedding dress for her execution. They were executed for the robbery murders of guests in their inn known as the 6 Mile House in Charleston. What is it with South Carolina? Like, seriously? And now that one might be one that would be worth digging further into because it was an inn and it doesn't say how many guests. I wonder if it was one of those serial situations. Um, July 12th, 1833, Frankie Stewart Silver was hanged in Morganton, North Carolina, for the axe murder of her husband. She was 18 at the time of the crime and was the first woman to be hanged in North Carolina. Frankie claimed that she killed her drunken husband in self defense as he was loading his gun, intending to shoot her. As Frankie stood with the rope around her neck, she attempted to make a final speech but was interrupted by her father, who shouted at her, "Die with it in you, Frankie." One is left to wonder what secrets she took with her to the grave. That's an interesting one. Okay, that one, I mean, when your own father, like, seriously, what the hell is wrong with her dad? Like, really? What the hell kind of dad does that? Seriously. And in self defense? What the fudge? America's messed up, and that was in 1833. 1833. Wow. Next one is in February 9th, 1844. Esther Foster, it just says colored, was hanged for the murder of a fellow inmate outside of a prison in Franklin, Ohio. They don't say why she was originally in jail, but Esther sold her body to a local surgeon in return for all the candy she could eat. I mean, why not? I mean, if you're going to die, at least have some fun on the way out. On May 23rd, in 1845, Elizabeth Reed was publicly hanged at Lawrenceville, Illinois, for the murder by poisoning of her husband. She was the first woman to be hanged in Illinois. That's one of the reasons I highlighted it. She was a first. Ah, that is a very good possibility, JJ. I wouldn't have even thought of that. That's, yeah, very possible. Um, A slave known only as Cecilia, on September 22nd, 1848, became the first and only woman hanged in Florida. She was executed for killing of her master, Jacob Bryan, whom she battered to death with a hoe, and I'm talking the garden one. It has been suggested that Celia was Bryan's daughter. No other woman had been executed in the state until Judy I don't know, was electrocuted on March 30th, 1998. So Florida doesn't like to send women to execution. That's nice to know. Um, don't do anything to deserve a execution, no matter where you live. But that's interesting about Florida. Only two women appear to have ever been executed there until 1998. Next one I found interesting was September 10th, 1852. Jane Williams, a black slave, was hanged for slaying her master's wife, Mrs. Winston. Why she got a different? Oh, Mrs. Winston. Oh, okay. They did. Okay, I thought it. Oh, never mind. And their child at Richmond, Virginia. She was taken to the gallows in a cart, and once there told the attending minister, the Reverend Dr. Ryland, that she alone was guilty. The cart was driven from under her at 10:46 a.m. She reportedly kicked convulsively for several minutes. The execution drew a crowd of 6,000 people. The state offered to pay Jane's owner $500 compensation for taking away his property by executing them. Jane had pleaded guilty at her trial. Her husband John was hanged at the same gallows October 22nd, 1852, for his part in the crime. So that was how many years apart? Oh, that was only a couple months apart. It was a month apart. That's interesting. They didn't compensate him for his wife and child. They compensated him for his slaves being executed. What? How does that make sense? Some of those laws, like I said, I don't defend slavery in any way or the laws that promote it, but I do stand firmly in the causes of the Civil War. This is just nuts. This is nuts. And what state was this in again? Um, Virginia. Okay. Next one. Anna Belansky. She's white, age 34, on March 23rd, 1860, went to the gallows in St. Paul, Minnesota, for the arsenic poisoning of her husband, Stanislaus, the only female to be executed in the state. The hanging was carried out in nominal privacy, although people got onto every vantage point to see the proceedings. They did not see a great deal, as Anne died with a hardly a struggle, according to contemporary reports. So in Minnesota, in the 1800s to the 1930s, she was the only woman executed. Good job, Minnesota. I can appreciate that. Thank you. Um, Next one I found interesting was in 1865, March 10th, a 17-year-old Amy Spain, an African American, was hanged from a tree in downtown Darlington, South Carolina for treason and conduct unbecoming a slave. When she heard the Union Army was close at hand and would occupy the town, she expressed her satisfaction by clasping her hands and exclaiming, "Bless the Lord, the Yankees have come," for it should have meant the end of slavery, but the town folks saw it differently. Now, I also want to explain. Now, 1865 is basically when they were pushing, because it was towards the end of the war. But what she doesn't understand is that when Union soldiers came through at the beginning of the war, they didn't free the slaves when they came at the plantations and stuff. They just burned everything to the ground. Just going to point that out. The Union, when they were going through, they were burning the homes, murdering, harming civilians and slaves alike. They forget to mention that in a lot of places. It is very little known, but yes, the slaves were not set free by the Union until the actual end of the war. It was like, holy crap, y'all didn't know that, how many towns over for the other parts of the war, everyone was being hurt and harmed or ended by the Union soldiers. So, you know, again, this is where I love history and I hate that it's been edited. So, yeah, as much as 1865 is the end of the war, yeah, she's probably already heard about the Emancipation Proclamation at that point, and it was a mess. It really, truly was. So, that's what they were pushing for. July 7th, 1865, 45-year-old Mary Surratt was hanged by the military at the Washington Arsenal Penitentiary in Washington, D.C., for the role she may have played in the conspiracy to assassinate Abraham Lincoln. We only hear of John Wilkes Booth. We didn't hear about this one in the history books, did we? Um, this is one I didn't even know about until I read this. And I have dug really deep into history. And I didn't know about this. This one actually shocked me. Because I usually know a lot more about it. This was the first female execution under federal jurisdiction, and unusually for the time as well, was well photographed. Her three co-conspirators were executed alongside her. All were given a drop of about 5 feet, which proved insufficient to break their necks. Um, Mind-boggling. So, a year later-ish, January 19th, 1866, 50-year-old Martha Grinder, the Pittsburgh poisoner, was hanged in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania for the poisoning by arsenic of Mary Carothers and Jane Buchanan, crimes to which she confessed. She told the astonished jury at her trial, I love to see death in all its forms and phases, and left no opportunity to graffiti my taste for such sights, or sorry, gratify my taste for such sights. Could I have had my own way, probably I should have done more. She went bravely to the gallows, set up in the Pittsburgh prison yard, and seemed quite serene in the face of death. Martha wore a brown dress trimmed with white lace and was unusually masked with a white hood on the gallows. The trap opened at 1:15 p.m., and she struggled hard for several minutes after suspension, allegedly due to the noose being allowed to become damp and not sliding smoothly. It was suspected that the two women were not her only victims. Interesting. Oh, hold on. I see JJ put up a note. Mary Surratt was the operator of the boarding house where Booth and others supposedly met and discussed the plot to delete Lincoln and others. And see, I don't recall her name being mentioned. I knew about the boarding house where they were planning it all out, but I did not recall hearing her name. And did she really have anything to do with it, or was she just unaware that they were using her boarding house to do such a thing? And that makes you kind of scratch your head. And I know I've read quite a bit since you posted that, so there must be some lag between me talking and that popping up. But very interesting to know, because I swear I don't recall that one. So that is new to me. I appreciate that info. I was actually going to go dig it up afterwards, how she played into it. So thank you for saving me on that headache. But I'm really stunned that she was executed for this, and I just didn't hear it. But thank you, Art. And by the way, welcome. I appreciate it. Um, August 30th of 1867, Bridget Durgan, a 22-year-old servant girl of Irish descent, was hanged at the jail yard in New Brunswick, New Jersey, before a crowd of a noisy and boisterous crowd of 2,000 people. Um, I don't recall the details, but she may have been wrongly accused. Yeah. And see, I think that's part of why it wasn't mentioned in a lot of history books, especially from my era. Because you got to remember, through the 90s and the early 2000s was when I was doing most of my research when I could. And there might not have been much available because of the false accusations. They might have tried to hide it out. But like I said, I'm going to dig deeper into that one because that one fascinates me. Um, so in front of the crowd, noisy and boisterous, which is pretty much the same thing, very vocal crowd, of 2,000 people for the murder of her mistress, Mrs. Mary Ellen Coriel. I hope I pronounced that right. um, whom she had stabbed to death. She wore a brown suit, white collar, and white gloves, and walked steadily to the gallows. The crowd of some 2,000 people watched as Bridget was jerked into the air by mechanism instead of being dropped through a trap. She died very hard, the struggling and convulsing for some minutes in the agonies of strangulation. And this was back in 1867. I know I said it earlier, but dang, really? Really? That is just so messed up. And she was an Irish servant. Um, so that's it bugs me. Like I said, what if somebody else had done it? Did they prove it was her? Was there no shadow of a doubt? Um, February 17th, 1868, youth was no bar to execution in the 19th century. On this day, a 13-year-old African American girl named Susan was hanged in Henry County, Kentucky for murder. She was she was a babysitter and was accused of killing one of her charges, according to the local newspaper. She writhed and twisted and jerked many times. It was reported that many solid citizens asked for a piece of the hanging rope as a souvenir after they cut her down. Again, when you have a 13-year-old babysitting, shit can go wrong. Did she do it on purpose? What more details were there? These are ones I think I really want to dig a little bit deeper in, so we might have some further explanations to this. Um, then we scroll down a bit. On April 22nd, 1881, a crowd of about 100 gathered outside of the county jail in Lunenburg, County, Virginia, for the semi-private hanging of Lucinda Folks, black, age unknown, who had murdered her husband with an axe. She alleged that her husband abused her. Here's another one. Self-defense, more than likely the case, and she was executed for it. What do they mean semi-private? It either is or it isn't. Like, I don't know. It bugs me. Um, on June 23rd, 1882, Lucinda Tisdale, black unknown, age, became one of four people hanged in at Kingstree, South Carolina. She was executed beside Anderson Singleton for the murder of his wife, who was Lucinda's sister. Two other men were hanged for arson and robbery on the same day, um, later in the day. So she helped her brother-in-law kill her sister. Not unheard of. Not a first time. I'm sure there's some better motive behind it. Yes, I wrote that was weird. Let me make sure my audio is still coming through. Okay, I apologize. My headphones decided to shut off for no reason. Let me make sure that it's still coming through. I apologize. Okay, yep. So, yep, my audio's still coming through. I apologize. I don't know what's going on with my tech. All right, thank you, Art. Yeah, my tech is acting stupid today. I don't know what it is. So, where we left off. Okay. So March 30th, 1883, Emmeline um Lucy Meeker White, age 44, was hanged at Windsor, Vermont for poisoning murder of her husband's niece, a 9-year-old, Alice Meeker, so that she could inherit $400. Well, $400 in 1883 is like what? Almost probably closer to 40,000, 400,000 in this day and age. I don't know. I haven't done the conversion, but I know it's pretty dang high. She was the first of only two women to be executed in the state. So Vermont has only executed two women between the 1600s and the 1937 time. Um, the other was 21-year-old Mary Roger in 1905. Emmeline chose a black dress with white trim for her execution and asked to see the gallows beforehand, which was permitted. She was hung in the prison yard at 1:30 p.m. before an invited audience and was certified dead 14 minutes later. February 28th, 1887, 40-year-old Roxalana Druser was hanged in New York for murder. She and her, and this is the reporting of the time, not my medical diagnosis or any name calling. So evidently, Roxalana and her retarded daughter Mary beat her husband John, age 72, to death, and then chopped up his body afterwards, boiling down the remains. They lived in a frontier cabin in Little Falls, New York, and were caught because her 12-year-old son informed police that his father was missing. The alleged motive for the crime was that her husband worked too hard. What? Her daughter was given a prison sentence for her part of the crime. At the execution, Roxolana was jerked upwards by a weighted rope instead of being dropped through a trap door, and this failed. I wonder how many of those it took before they figured that one out. Um, and it took her several agonizing minutes to strangle to death on the noose. The scene was so upset the officials that the scene so upset the officials that it was decided to alter the method of execution, and this led to the introduction of the electric chair in 1890. Okay, so just 3 years later, they put up the electric chair. That's awesome. Next interesting one was June 25th, 1889. Sarah Jane Whiteling, sorry, a 51-year-old white woman, was executed in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, for the murder by arsenic poisoning of her husband, son, and daughter. She mounted a defense of insanity brought on by menopause. Really? Menopause is your reason for this? How stupid. Okay, anyways, this was obviously rejected by the jury. The execution was carried out in a corridor of the county prison and was attended by some 30 witnesses who saw the trap fall at 10:07 a.m. Less than a minute later, less than a minute after Sarah had mounted it. Like, how can you blame menopause? Okay, I know guys that are listening because there's guys in the audience. So I apologize. I'm pretty sure you guys don't know this, but menopause does not cause that. I, I'm sorry. They can bite me. Menopause does not cause you to commit murder. Like, anyways, next one. Where's my mouse? Okay, there it is. So October 7th, 1892, 15-year-old Milbury Brown, an African American, was hanged in Spartansburg, South Carolina for killing a 1-year-old child. She shared the gallows with John Williams, who had been convicted of the murder of Jay Henneman, the mayor. They were executed at 11 a.m. before some 20 witnesses and were given a drop of 6 feet, which proved adequate to break their necks. On the same day, unmarried mother Anne Tribble was hanged in private at Newberry, South Carolina, for the murder of her baby on February 23rd. She had deserted the baby in a field. Ouch. That really sucks. That's not okay to leave your baby deserted in a field. Um, On July 17th, 1903, 38-year-old Dora Wright, who is black, became the first woman to be hanged in the 20th century when she was put to death at South McAllister, Oklahoma, for the murder of 7-year-old Annie Williams. With her on the gallows was Charles Barrett, who was executed for a separate murder. Dora had beaten Annie over a period of several months before finally whipping her to death on February 2nd, 1903. Just before 7 a.m., both prisoners were given a drop of 7 feet and died without a struggle. Who the heck? How sadistic do you have to be to do that to a 7-year-old? Man, that's messed up. Society is getting better, but it's still not the best. Next one I found that was interesting was the last one on the list. And I'm probably going to call it a slightly early day. As you can hear, I've got sinus issues going on. Um, on April 29th, 1937, Mary Holmes became the last woman to suffer judicial hanging in the United States. And this is not true. As we know, more people will be hanged down the road. Just this is in the 1900s. So she had been hanged at 1248 at Rolling Fort, Mississippi. Her co-defendant, 32-year-old Selman Brooks, was hanged at the same gallows at 1:32 p.m. They had been jointly convicted of robbery and murder of Mary's employer, Mr. E.W. Cook, May 29th, 1936. Man, look, and again, there's a lot more in here that I didn't even cover. I didn't cover all of these because there were definitely, I mean, I wanted to pick the most fascinating ones. And this one right here, a Mary Snodgrass in 1896 was hanged for burning her baby in a fireplace. She was the last woman hanged in the 19th century. Martha Place was the last woman executed in America in the 19th century when she went to the electric chair a year later in 1899. So they did get that mixed up. But initially, Mary Snodgrass, I apologize. Who the hell does this kind of stuff and is there proof to it? Can they actually prove this happened? I mean, there's just so many here. And this is just the women. I mean, could you imagine the list of men? And this only goes from the 1600s to 1937. I haven't even done the most up to date ones. This is absolutely wild. How many people have been executed in the United States of America? And it makes you think how many were wrongfully done. Um, Let me pop back up to the top and I'll drop the links to all of this for you guys in the description to the George Steiny case and to all of these. Um, in case you guys are curious more about it. And I kind of skipped over. Um, but they say that altogether it was around 505 women have been put to death in America between 1608 and 1900. Um, it's just wild. Absolutely wild. Oh my God, my head's pounding. So I'm gonna go ahead and drop these links in for you guys. Um, and just kind of go from there because I'm really not feeling great and doing all that reading has caused a bit of strain, but I just wanted to finish that off for you guys. And I've got some interesting stuff pertaining to autism that I want to talk about a little bit. Um, I think I might have a way to do it without getting in trouble. It's not so much going to be a vaccine cause, but I want to talk about the genetic possibilities. JJ, I guess it's a few moments behind, but yeah, if you kill your boss, you don't get paid. That's stupid. That's really stupid to do. Yep. But, it's just wild. It really truly is just wild. So, um I'm going to call it a day. My head's pounding and I'll be back on Thursday. Dee may not be at Rex Sisters on Thursday. Um so I will be probably handling that mostly on my own. I'm going to finish off the Jasmine Crockett and start into the next one, which will probably be Alexandria Ocasio Cortez. That crazy one. I'll probably start into her if I get finished with Jasmine Crockett in time. Um, and then Dee will jump in on Thursday if she's available. If not, we're assuming not for right now. And then we'll be both back on Friday to do some more corrupt politicians. And I'm going to be doing gaming every day, probably between 10 and 1, 10 in the morning and 1 in the afternoon Central Time. I want to get some more gaming time in. I absolutely love this game I'm playing, and I I gotta yeah I'm getting addicted to it. So every morning um I'll be jumping in, doing some gaming, and having a lot of fun. So, let me call it a day, and we'll get you guys tomorrow.
So with that, I thank you all for showing up, being here, and as usual, stay safe, stay sane, stay sober. I truly appreciate those who showed up and those who are going to be watching later on. I will catch y'all on the next one.